Hello and welcome to this history news for May. I am going to just go this way. Yep. This has been sent in by Jennifer. Let me know in the chat if you know what I'm sat in front of. Just that again. Graceful as ever. So let's just do the usual. We have got lots of updates. We've got some repatriation, decolonization news. We've got new news. We've got some ding dong news. We've got some events and exhibitions to talk about. Thank you to everybody who is watching live. If you are watching on the playback, thank you also for giving up your time. I've got a lot of articles to get through. As always, they will be listed and numbered in the description box, which should be below this screen, depending on what you're watching on. And you will also notice as we go into the slideshow that we're going to be talking about, there'll be numbers on the bottom of the slide. They correspond with the numbers of the articles in the description box. Thank you to everybody who sent me articles. I have seen lots of articles coming in today. They haven't made it into this slideshow because I had already made it. But if they aren't already here, then we will talk about them next time. Let's do some hellos. Hello, Lizzie B. Thank you for joining. Hi, Shane. Yes, all are well here. The children are still awake. Bath time for one. The other one's fighting sleep. We've had it's been a bit of an upheavally kind of week because last weekend I was down in Dover working at the castle, which was really good fun. And then in the week, my husband went off to work abroad as well. So it has been a little bit toing and froing. On the last day he was away, the day he was coming back, I managed to break my little toe on the high chair. So by the time he got off his flight, the little toe on my foot was a very disturbing colour, to the point that I wasn't 100% sure that it wasn't going to drop off. But the next day it was purple rather than looking like it was necrotized. And now the bruising is spreading all the way up my foot. So it's been a time. But apart from that, we're all okay. Slightly discombobulated and my foot hurts, but we're doing well. Hi, Leona. I've just seen a headline about something that's happened in Liverpool. It's breaking news here. So I will not go into it because I don't know what's happened, but it does seem like there has been a event in Liverpool that looks like people will have been hurt. So anybody who is in Liverpool, our thoughts go out to you. And I'm not going to speculate on what's gone on because I saw it break less than a minute ago. Hello, Medusa. Thank you for joining. Hello, Jessie. Thank you for joining. Thank you for coming in from Utah, Sarah. And Beth. Oh, Alex, New Zealand. Alex, New Zealand? Where is Alex, New Zealand? Hello. Joanne, thank you for joining in from Boston. Oh, we have got some guesses coming in. We are. Who went first? Medusa, you are correct. It is an old building, indeed. Good spot. Carol, York Castle. Yes, do you know what? I always do this, but I want to go this way. This is Clifford's Tower. Carol is saying that it's a location of a massacre of the Jews. I don't know if I know it happened in York. I'm not sure if it happened in this specific tower, but thank you for the additional information. And hello, everybody. So we have got quite a bit to get through. So without further ado, let's hop in and say the thank yous for sending in the news articles first and foremost. Thank you to Elverta, Jessie, to Alicia, Beth, Sarah, Natalie, named Twin Cat, Snudpuckle, Yvonne, Joseph, Sheri, Jenna, Steve, Emelia, Rebecca, to Jackie, Mackenzie, Daniella, Liliana, Scarlet OhHaha, and Amelia. Again, I've doubled you up there, Amelia. So you got named twice. thank you so much for taking the time to send me the news articles. It really does mean ever so much to see that people care enough to think of me when they're out about in their daily life, because obviously there's a month between these news items, so it is just always really heartening that people take the time to send me news articles, because it means they've seen something and gone, oh, Kat will like that. So yes, thank you very much. First of all, let's hop into an update, and this is a sort of update of a ding dong, but these, I was going to say a rude word there, these rapscallions have been done for it. So we found out who was in charge of this Sycamore Gap tree nonsense. This is the tree that was growing in that dip of Hadrian's Wall. If you saw Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and many other things, it was iconic. So this was chopped down. The individuals responsible, Daniel Michael Graham, 39, from Carlisle, and Adam Carruthers, 32, from Wington in Cumbria, both convicted of 2 counts of criminal damage. It was referred to as a, quote, moronic mission and mindless thuggery that they have shaped to be a bit of a laugh. Their jury sat for about 5 hours to reach their verdicts. Both have been remanded in custody for their own protection ahead of the sentencing on the 15th of July, because I'm sure that in the local area there's quite a lot of ill feeling, and these 2 chuckleheads won't be particularly safe. The value of this tree, how one values a tree, I don't know, because I'm not a valuer of things, specifically not trees, but it was valued to be at more than £620,000, but apparently that figure is disputed. But the amount it's worth would apparently not affect their prison sentence. The tree was planted in the late 1800s. It was a feature of the landscape. These 2 specimens were apparently best friends, birds of a feather and all that, but they have apparently fallen out spectacularly after this nonsense that they've done, and they, I think, have just turned tail on each other consistently. It's still unclear as to what these fools were thinking and why they did it. No explanation has ever been offered, but of course, as Superintendent Kevin Waring of Northumbria Police points out, whatever their reason would be, it would never justify this just mindless brutality and mindless damage that didn't just obviously cut down the tree, but it also damaged Hadrian's Wall, so 2 very important sites. It took them just 3 minutes to cut it down, and it does seem that they filmed the process on their mobile phones. So kids, if we're going to do crimes, don't do crimes. But if we are going to do crimes, how about we don't videotape the evidence? Absolute clowns. And just it's so mindless. So that's what's going on with Sycamore Gap. The sentencing is delayed until, I want to say, July, but of course we will update when we have their sentences in. An update on this piece, the Russian war prisoner. We've talked about this a few times, because this is an artwork that was allegedly looted by the Nazis. It's held currently at the Art Institute of Chicago, and a New York judge has ruled that they had to surrender this piece because it's been looted by the Nazis. However, an appellate judge issued an emergency stay this week, and so it can stay in Chicago for now. We've got a quote here, quote, "There is significant evidence that demonstrates this work was not looted, and previous courts have found that evidence to be credible. We have been granted a stay from the museum, allowing the work to remain in our custody while we continue exploring our options for appeal." The Russian war prisoner, the piece, is not currently on display. It's estimated to be worth about $1.25 million. So as to what comes next, this painting remains at the Chicago Gallery while they consider the appeal. If they appeal the decision to turn over the work, then oral arguments on it will be beginning in November. So as we find out more and more, I will, of course, pass that information on. This is, we've talked about this a few times, the rolled up scroll that was not calcified. Whatever the word for the thing is that happens when it gets really hot. That happened. I can't remember the word for that. This is damaged in Vesuvius, or not actually seemingly damaged, because they've used various technologies to unfurl it digitally and get the wording out. This is a burned, still rolled scroll, and they have found the author. Thank you. Carbonized, Blue Silver. That's the word I was looking for. I was going to say ossified, but that's just absolute brain fart on the word carbonized. Thank you very much. So this was carbonized. It was buried in the eruption of Vesuvius. The scroll, named P. Herc 172, is one of hundreds from Herculaneum. It's been preserved under mud and ash, and it's thought to have once been owned by the father-in-law of Julius Caesar. It's in the article as well, the carbonization has rendered them extraordinarily fragile. But these researchers managed to essentially digitally unfurl them and then figure out what was written on them. It's incredible. I don't even pretend to know how one goes about this, but what an amazing leap forward in science. The scroll has been now identified as being titled On Vices. And that's by the Greek philosopher Philodemus. This is an ethical treatise known in full as On Vices and Their Opposite Virtues, and in whom they are and about what. Interesting. Apparently scholars have generally thought the first book of On Vices was called On Flattery, but this document seems to point out that that isn't what's gone on. October 2023, the first full word from one of these unopened ancient papyri was decoded with the help of all this technology. That word was porphyrus, the Greek word for purple. In February, researchers investigating the columns of text from P. Herc 172 identified the word disgust, which appears not as in talk, as in discussed, rather than we discussed it. The gross one rather than the conversation one, which appears twice within a few columns of text, the Bodleian Library says. So I think we're going to have more and more of the findings coming out of this as time goes on. It seems like there's still loads more to do. And also, presumably, this is going to mean wonderful things for texts that are found in the future. This technology is it's going to really literally open things up, which is so cool. So we have got an update on the Grand Egyptian Museum. It does appear to be open. Question mark. Maybe. We talked last time, we saw pictures from inside. The article, though, was a little bit cagey, I found, as to whether or not it was actually fully open. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, or for how long, or whether it's going to be open every day. Like, it seemed like there were some questions and queries about how open it actually was, which I found very confusing. However, we have got this article about 163 treasures from Tutankhamun's tomb that have apparently arrived at the museum. And the article is much longer than this, but I just pulled out the pretty pictures because I'm shallow like that. And I thought we could have a look at them. So the one on, will you be looking at the same way as me? Probably right. The one on the left side of the screen, the golden thing with the chariot driver. This is one of the artifacts that has been transferred to the Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza. So we've got what appears to be a chariot rider, and the detailing on it is absolutely phenomenal. And then in the middle, we've got apparently we've got funerary masks coming in as well. And we've got what looks to be a throne. Just incredible stuff that's there. And do check out the images of these items, because they really are the workmanship, the various items that have gone in to make these pieces. This what looks like a brooch down at the bottom, with all of these various gemstones on the scarab beetle, on the fish. Clearly you've got things like lapis lazuli going on here. I'm not sure what the orange stones are, but they are beautiful. So yes, it does look incredible. And if anybody has had a chance to go to the Grand Egyptian Museum, how much of it is open? How easy was it to get in there? Do they do tours? Did you have a nice time? Do let me know what you thought. Another update, more things coming out of Pompeii. And I'm pretty sure I saw some other articles coming in today about some finds in Pompeii as well. This is entitled, "In Their Final Moments, a Pompeii Family Fought to Survive." Archaeologists have unearthed the skeletal remains of 4 people in a well-appointed Roman home, with signs of their efforts to outlast the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. So it talks about what happens one day in the year 79. Pompeii came under fire. The explosion of nearby Mount Vesuvius sent a mushroom cloud of ash and rock into the atmosphere, pummeling the ancient Roman trading hub and resort in a ceaseless hail of tiny volcanic rocks. Many residents ran for their lives, trying to find safety with their loved ones before searing volcanic debris buried the estimated 1,500 residents who remained in Pompeii. So in a study published last month in the journal Scavi di Pompeii, scientists documented the events at one home of the doomed city, where a family sought refuge inside a back room, pushing a wooden bed against a door in a vain attempt to stop a flood of volcanic rocks from the sky, known as lapilli. The skeletal remains of 4 people, most likely members of the same family, were identified in this study. The falling rock, which reaches heights of about 9 feet in some locations, could not be controlled. Researchers think that people made a final attempt to escape, leaving the small room in which they had barricaded themselves. However, they only got as far as the triclinium, the formal dining room where their remains were found. The family in the house of Helium Phrixus probably died when the so-called pyroclastic flow, an avalanche of hot ash and toxic gas, arrived and parts of their building collapsed. It suggested that these people were family that stayed behind, but it may have included some enslaved people who worked in the residence. Quote, "It's not certain that the individuals found in the house as victims were part of a family." Among the skeletal remains was a bronze bulla that belonged to a child. These ancient amulets were worn like lockets around the necks of young free boys to shield them from danger as they reached adulthood. Quote, "The amulet was supposed to protect them, so there's a cruel irony to the fact that it didn't." So yes, these sad stories are coming out of these finds. Quote, "Whatever the nature of their specific relations, they would have been the last people to offer each other comfort in the end." On those orange stones, Leonis pointed out, I did know that word, carnelian stones. So those orange stones are carnelians. I always think it's very interesting where the stones for various bits of jewellery come from. I mean, a lot of them will be, certainly, because a lot of the stones that are found in medieval jewellery in this country have come from Egypt and its environ nations. So I wonder how far it would have had to come if all of the stones would have been potentially sourced fairly locally. Sarah, on the topic of Pompeii, I can't imagine the fear. No, it's these things that we find out about in history. It's when I was making my video talking about the Bethnal Green tube disaster. It's these split-second moments where an accident, a natural disaster, just occurs with very little warning, and lives and families are just decimated in the blink of an eye. It's something that is, I believe, one of those moments where the past and now there's a sort of opening, because while we may not have experienced it, we can imagine the fear of the worst case scenario. Because I think there's many people who, you're something, and maybe it certainly happened more for me as I've become a parent. Like, you see your child doing something and immediately you see 5 different ways that can end horribly. And it would be an accident. And so I think there's that kind of very human sensation that these people were just living their daily lives, eating food, playing games with their family, fighting over an item of clothing, the normal stuff of everyday life. And then just their world literally blew up. Clue. Yeah, Pompeii is fascinating, but it's incredibly sad. And when I went there, the one time I did go there, I did feel like they had the appropriate reverence for what had gone on. I think it's interesting they use casts of the human remains. They don't, those what you see, the people that are on display there, they aren't people, they're casts of what was left behind, the gaps of their remains. Yeah, it's incredibly sad, but I think also it's really important to remember all of these things. And I think it's very good that Pompeii hasn't become a place where, for example, people have weddings and things like that, that it remains a place where you go to find out about the history of this. Hi, Boo Boo. I'm very glad that you have made a live too from British Columbia, Canada, Vancouver Island. Thank you so much. I don't know what the weather's like over there. It'll be warming up now, won't it? I mean, we've had a few nice days over here, although today it has been peeing with rain. So this is an update, because last news there was some discussion about the Smithsonian being forced, demanded, commanded to return lots of their items. And it was said that the Woolworth lunch counter might be something that had to be forced to be divested. This is so the Woolworth company, because we had Woolworths over here, but I think they're very different, even though the logo looks identical, because these Woolworths appear to be diners, whereas our Woolworths is where you go to buy pick and mix and biros. So this is something very different, but I think the companies may be connected because the logos are the same. So we're told the 1939 menu featured cubed minute steak, pan gravy, buttered beets with a roll and French fries for 25 cents, which is about $5.68 today. I mean, if you could get a lunch like that, you're probably working in the Houses of Parliament where it's subsidised, because the rest of us can't get it. But yes, of course, let's talk about people on PIP, shall we? So this is part of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. And I believe this is the Greenborough lunch counter. And this is the one that was desegregated. A counter stall is also on view at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Last month, erroneous news reports falsely claimed the lunch counter artifacts were being removed from display. There is a lot of disinformation going around at the moment about all sorts of things. It's very confusing how to keep track of things. it seems to me that whether it's citizen journalists or mainstream media, there is confusion and confusing accounts being reported, being allowed to be reported. And I don't know if it's a case that things are so unprecedented that everyone's confused, or if there's a deliberate attempt to confuse to see what could potentially be got away with, that you sort of... It's something that happened in the UK. There were definitely policies leaked to see how they'd float. And if they didn't do well, then they were told that it was misinformation or that people reported erroneously. So I do wonder if there's some following suit is happening and things are being released to see how it floats. I don't know. It's somewhat confusing. See, yeah, Jessie, it's reported that something's been removed until there's uproar, and then they claim no, people were mistaken. Yeah, it feels like that. It feels like that because I do. If I get sent a news item, I will, first of all, if I don't recognize the source, I will Google the headline and I will find out how many other news items are how many news articles are reproducing it, and how many outlets are reproducing it. If I can't find much, or I don't recognize lots of the sources, then I will go and bias check the source that I've been sent if it's someone I don't recognize. And so the news items I provide, I have done that with them. So to me, it passed my smell test, which means that what I classify as a reputable news source got this wrong. Or were they allowed or encouraged to get it wrong for reasons? But then everything just feels like a conspiracy theory when you say things like that, and it makes me sound a little bit nuts, more nuts than usual. Anyway, this is apparently not, this Woolworths counter is not going anywhere. We're told that Woolworths' dominance was challenged by a boom in discount retailers, and in 1997, the company closed its remaining 400 US stores. The last operating lunch counter was in Bakersfield, California, no longer owned by Woolworths, but it closed in 2022. However, this June, the counter in Bakersfield is reopening, serving hot meals again after renovations by a husband and wife, Emelia and Sheri Waite, who have installed images of historical sit-ins above the luncheonette, as well as landmark pieces of artists of colour from 1930s to today. So that is happening. Haven't got an exact date, but that is going to be serving hot meals this June, so next month. If anybody is going to be near Bakersfield, California, when this opens, do take some pictures. The kitchen equipment, we're told, is all original, still functioning, albeit with some challenges. They have reupholstered the built-in red lunch stools and the original teal and peach colour scheme, and removed the laminate floor to uncover what they're describing as a charming terrazzo tile. Although it's not original, they are keeping the sign over the door that says "Visit Woolworths Luncheonette," which you can see there. Quote, Emelia says, "I think the whole community would probably hang us out to dry if we replaced it because they love it so much." If people are going to go check this out or they're anywhere nearby, please take some pictures. Let us know what it's like. Enjoy the food. Terrazzo is apparently a type of marble. Thank you, Jessie. Boo Boo, so many lunches enjoyed with my nana decades ago. Great memories of childhood. See, this thing is, when I see like a lunch counter like this, to me, this is like quintessential American. All of the films that we sort of grew up on, the TV and stuff, where we grew up on it, watching American film and TV, or the diner scene, it looked just like this. Whether it was like in Greece or When Harry Met Sally, and they probably, to you, look completely different. But for us, this is like quintessentially American. And so our Woolworths are very different, but this does look really cool. Sarah, you're going to California for the 4th of July. Fabulous. If you're anywhere nearby, Do report back if you get the chance. Fabulous. Amanda says, I sincerely hope there's no asbestos under those tiles. Do you know what? Me too. Hopefully it will have been checked before they started ripping it up. However, despite the erroneous reporting on this lunch counter, the next update, I think I'm going to go with this. I trust the source. So 2 lenders to presentations currently on view at the National Museum of African American History and Culture said that their objects were removed sooner than expected, lending them to question what roles Trump's recent criticism of the Smithsonian played in these changes. A report that was published by NBC News said that at least 32 objects have been removed from the galleries of this museums. And this is about, quote, anti-American content in the museum spaces. It's not clear why the objects were reportedly removed, however, or whether they were merely switched out to replace the galleries. The lenders who were interviewed suggested the removals of their objects was not merely standard practice. Amos C. Brown, a civil rights activist and a pastor, lent the museum a book on Black history written in 1880 and his father's Bible, which Martin Luther King Jr. had personally carried during protests. So in April, so a month after the executive order was issued, the books were removed because the loan expired in May. However, Brown said that he didn't view it that way. He said, quote, I feel it to be very much inhumane, disrespectful, and downright unjust. The report also quoted Liz Brazelton, who lent the diary of her great-great-grandfather. He was a lawyer who worked on behalf of Solomon Northup, a free Black man who was kidnapped and forcibly enslaved. This is the individual whose story is immortalized in Steve McQueen's 12 Years a Slave. The museum returned this diary in March before the end of a 10-year loan agreement that was due to run out in September. Reportedly, the museum attributed this to, quote, internal gallery rotation schedule. The Smithsonian has addressed the removal of objects in a release in which the museum network said suggestions that the Smithsonian had planned or intended to remove these items is false. So it's not clear whether Trump's executive order had played any role in the public-facing activities of the museum. The museum has, though, faced a big change behind the scenes in March. The institution's director, Kevin Young, stepped down from his post in April. He went on personal leave starting on March 14th before the executive order was issued, but probably with a very good idea of what was coming down the pike. I'll be honest with you, I don't know what to make of this, because the lenders are saying something funny's going on, but the museum is going, nothing to see here. But can the museum say anything else when they're dependent on federal funding? We'll keep updating. We'll keep an eye on it. The things are really confusing. Sarah, I fully believe the lenders in this case. Look, I'm inclined to as well. They presumably know it was agreed. I don't necessarily see why they would have a reason, why 2 people would have a reason to lie about this, unless the intent is to fabricate the idea that something funny is going on with who's in charge of museum exhibitions and who's calling the shots. Unless the intention is to make the museum's administration and the government administration look bad, I can't see the point of the deception. But also, if that was the intention, then surely there'd be documentation to prove that's not what happened. Presumably. And Jessie, if you want to see what happens when an institution says something against the current administration, just look at Harvard. So look, I can see why that's the thing. I can see There is a motive potentially for everybody involved to be deceptive. However, I do lean where the lenders are, but I can't say for sure. Medusa, thanks for reminding me. Yes, Harvard is offering free classes on the Constitution these days, so everybody should I think check that out wherever you happen to live. Wherever you happen to live. Next up, this I think is based upon the documentary that came out, I want to say 3 or 4 months ago. There are claims that they're of proof that the Prince in the Tower certainly weren't killed, but instead that they escaped and perhaps became Lambert Simnel in one case and Perkin Warbeck in the other. This is from Philippa Langley's Missing Princes project, where citizen archivists and historians scoured various archives across Europe. And the claim is that they have found brand new, never before seen sources that say things that nobody's ever seen before or heard before. Now, from experts in these particular documents, I'm going to say that I don't know of anybody that is comfortable with saying that these are never before seen documents. I'm going to say that. I also saw the documentary, and while the sources are very interesting, what it proves to me is that there was an individual on the continent trying to raise funds and an army who was claiming to be the rightful King of England. But we knew that already. And that members of the rightful King of England's, if he had been him, family accepted that this was who he was. But we knew that already. I don't think that necessarily proves that they were spirited away. I think it proves there was somebody on the continent claiming they had a claim to the throne, which we knew already. However, Philippa Langley said to the Times, quote, "Had we supplied the amount of evidence in this book to say Richard III had murdered the Prince in the Tower, would you be asking me the question, as in who did it? I would say now they have to prove that Richard III murdered the Prince in the Tower." Well, yes, and also no. I think this remains a mystery. I think it's entirely possible. I do think it's entirely possible that these two boys did not die by anybody's hand, that it could have been an accidental death or an illness. I do believe that. I don't believe they survived, personally. I don't think that Perkin Warbeck or Lambert Simnel were anybody else than who they claim to be. But equally, if more evidence appears, I'd be very, very happy to learn about it and change my thinking. Leona says there'll never be an end to this until the monarchy allows testing on the bones. Yeah, so the remains found during the reign of Charles II that were put in Westminster Abbey, we might be able to, assuming that in these bones being moved, touched, opened up in the early 20th century, looked at again, photographed, assuming that we are able to get any uncorrupted DNA, which is not given, assuming that there is any part that can be DNA tested, and we perhaps find out that these two boys are related, because we have the DNA from the Richard III discovery of the King in the car park. If we were to find that these are the princes, my understanding is that science has not yet advanced far enough that we could determine with a certainty at which point, namely in whose reign, they died. I don't believe we can narrow it down to that level. Because, for example, growth plates don't alter month on month. They do, but it's not as testing them. It's not as finite as that. You can say this is a child of around 7. It's not this is a child of 7 and 6 months. That's not. They can't do that. I also think that barring something extraordinary, you are not going to find a cause of death on those remains. And so if you can't find out in whose reign they died and you can't find out cause of death, we're still on the thing of, well, who killed them? All that we could rule out is that they didn't leave the tower alive. My greatest concern is, what if it's not the princes? What if the remains buried, laid to rest in a holy place are some other unknown, unnamed boys? We will almost certainly never find out who they are. What happens to those remains if they are found to not be who we want them to be? Are they just discarded? They're buried namelessly again in where? A mass grave, a pauper's grave? What happens? Because they were people too. So I do have these concerns, and I do think that when people have been interred, there should be an expectation that you're allowed to rest in peace. I think, particularly if you have been interred with ceremony in a space of faith that sits within what you believed in. Blue, if they aren't the princes, it just raises so many more questions as to who they were and why they're there. It does, but also beneath the floor of the chapel, literally yards away, are over 1,000 sets of human remains. So there have been people that site has been operational. Stuff's been happening there since before the Roman invasion, and it was fortified and heavily used during the Roman period and onwards. Now, where they were found, it's likely going to be post-Norman, so it's going to have to be after the tower's built. And Tracy Borman has pointed out that the remains were allegedly found with silk velvet. Now, that is royal fabric. The chances that it's not the princes, I think, is very small. However, if it's not, those boys would still deserve to rest in peace, I think. Julesy, there are images from when they were taken out, and from some of the images that I have seen, we are talking fragmentary remains in like a piece of skull that's about this big. I don't think we've got anything that's like massively complete. But that's from what I've seen. So let's hop into repatriations. Repatriations of indigenous heritage. This is the Hudson's Bay Company is winding down. And apparently it's amid bankruptcy proceedings. Concern is growing over the future of its vast collection of artworks and artifacts. April 2025, the 355-year-old company, which initiated the fur trade and subsequent colonization of what is now called Canada, is going to be auctioning off 4,400 nationally significant items. This has, though, landed this former retail giant in the discourse going on about repatriation, rightly so. A statement published on May the 1st, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, along with the Assembly of First Nations and Manitoba Kiinwatinowi, Okimakanak, I apologise for that butchering, the MKO, called for the immediate return of any sacred cultural artefacts held in the Hudson Bay Company's collection. The value of this collection cannot be understated. The context behind how these cultural items are removed from their origin is at the centre of the repatriation argument. Without fully understanding how an item was acquired, sourced, or catalogued, there's no real way to determine its ownership. What can be determined is where an item originates. In the end, it doesn't matter if the item was legally traded 300 years ago during a time when colonisation and all of the harm, violence, and cultural erasure that came with it had yet to peak. The reason the item is significant now is because of where it comes from and what it could symbolise to return it. In the case of the Hudson's Bay, the issue is at hand is one of transparency. The retailer's choice to move forward with the auction for these artefacts without public assurance these items are not stolen seems to contradict not only Canada's commitment to reconciliation, but also a 2019 resolution by the United Nations Human Rights Council that calls on member states to develop a process, quote, to facilitate the international repatriation of Indigenous peoples' sacred items and human remains. When artefacts are sold to the highest bidder, there is no way to ensure their safe preservation. And because history has already happened, there is no way to replicate the significance of an artefact after it's been lost, especially when it gets squirreled away, only to be mounted on the wall of a wealthy collector's study. While some survivors choose to accept their artwork into the privacy of their homes, others give permission for their artwork to be used to be raised awareness of the legacy of the residential schools in Canada. And while student paintings from the 60s are not exactly what we tend to think of as artefacts, their return reinforces the logic of repatriation. Consultation with Indigenous communities can often help determine where an artefact of cultural significance might serve greatest purpose, whether they're needed for education or for healing. HBC's artefacts symbolise a deeply rooted and fraught legacy in Canada. Where those items end up is an issue of national importance. So it seems to me that we need to keep eyeballs on it. And we need to potentially apply pressure if and when we can. So saying that this needs to be returned, this is described, I'm going to get the exact description. This is a memorial pole stolen, we're told, from the Niska Nation, displayed at the National Museum of Scotland. So my understanding is that this, or one very like it, was already repatriated. But yeah, send them home. Send them home. Consult with the individuals for whom they are their cultural objects and cultural capital. 2,300-year-old Chinese silk boots are set to return to Beijing. I said boots, didn't I? I meant books. Books, not boots, apologies. These are 2 volumes of silk books. They arrived in Beijing from the United States, having been abroad for 79 years. They date back to 300 BCE. They are older, more than a century older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. Volume 1, a larger and more complete work, remains privately owned, but volumes 2 and 3 were transferred from the National Museum of Asian Art, part of the Smithsonian institution in the US. They were illegally excavated in 1942. They were first acquired by a Chinese collector and then illegally removed from the country in 1946 by John Hadley Cox, an American collector. They were then gifted to the museum in 1992. So we've got some fragments of these manuscripts here. There's been diplomatic efforts by the National Cultural Heritage Administration of China, which began formal negotiations with the Smithsonian after it published an ethical returns policy in 2022. The manuscripts, widely believed to be ritual or divinatory texts used by ancient shamans, are considered invaluable for research into early Chinese script, religion, cosmology, and the intellectual history of China. The 2 returned volumes, believed to include ritual texts or divination scripts referencing the mythical figures Fuxi and Nuwa, will make their public debut in July at the National Museum of China in Beijing. Very good. And a UK university has handed over ancestral remains to Japan's indigenous Ainu people. They were kept in the museum for over a century. These are skulls that were given back to representatives of Japan. This happened at a ceremony of the University of Edinburgh at the end of April. The remains are to be interred at a memorial site in the Upopoi National Ainu Museum and Park in Hokkaido on the Saturday at the start of May. Remains and cultural artifacts of these people were taken abroad for research purposes between the late 19th and early 20th century. In Britain, the remains of 3 Ainu people are kept in the Natural History Museum in London. The Japanese government is requesting their return. It's worth also mentioning that the Natural History Museum doesn't display mummies or human remains. They don't display mummified remains. I don't know if these are on display. I don't think they are on display. So they do have a kind of a wall of skulls for the evolution of human beings. But I don't believe that these are on display. I'm happy to be corrected, but certainly I know they have mummified remains that are not on display, but they use them for research, for example. So those are our repatriations. Let's Steve, I had this from Jennifer. Unless your email slipped, I said this was a Jennifer photo. It is Clifford's Tower, yes. But it came in an email that I was sure came from somebody called Jennifer. So if I have miscredited this, I apologise. I'm going to have to double check that. Because usually I download it and I immediately edit the description to say what it is. But if you recognise this, Steve, if you took it, then thank you. And I'm terribly sorry. At the top of the episode, I miscredited it as coming from Jennifer. I apologise. You sent me one in February. No, this is more recent. How strange. This is more recent. This got sent to me. Let me tell you, because I can tell you exactly when I downloaded it. This was sent to me in May, earlier this month. That's so strange, Steve, because if you sent me, that means I've had 2, probably from a very similar angle. Yes, multiple photos from multiple people. That's pretty cool. Well, there we go. Julesy, the world should just have one big day where every country has to return each other stuff. Like, we used to do a thing in Brighton after Christmas, and where we'd go to this like bar, and the presents that either didn't fit us or that we already had or we got duplicates of, we'd do like a swap meet. We should do that, but for the stuff that got looted, just like a kind of post-Christmas, everybody meet up, swap it back. Jessie, you sent me one today at the same place, but at night at a different angle. My goodness. York was popping off. Incredible. Right, let's hop into the new news, friends, because we're already nearly an hour in. Cloud archaeologists are at it again. A 9-year-old accidentally discovers a Stegomastodon, which I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds big, fossil in New Mexico. Jude Sparks was hiking when he tripped over the ancient creature's skull. And I believe what we're seeing there, those raised bits are two macerating molar teeth, which look to be the size of that child's shin. 9-year-old Jude Sparks was hiking in Las Cruces Desert when he tripped over something and fell. His face landed next to a massive jawbone, and then he looked up and saw a tusk. This is the fossilized skull of a 1.2 million year old Stegomastodon, an extinct proboscidean, we'll go with that belongs to the same family as elephants, mammoths, and mastodons. Unsurprisingly, Jude was not sure what he'd found. He knew it was an odd shape and that it was something going on. So one of his brother thought he'd found a cow's skull. I don't know how big the cows are where he's from. But they decided to consult with Peter Hood, who's a biology professor at New Mexico State University. They sent pictures of the remains, and he knew almost immediately that it was a Stegomastodon. Jude said the discovery had rekindled his interest in dinosaurs and fossils that had fascinated him in his relatively younger days, between 5 and 8. I mean, when you are a whole 9 years old, 5 to 8 feels like eons ago. I mean, that was the long, distant, dusty past. Quote, I'm not really an expert, Jude tells Fortune of the Times, but I know a lot about it, I guess. Bless you, Jude. He certainly has more paleontological experience than most 10-year-olds. According to the NMSU press release, the boy and his family were on hand during the process of the excavation, watching as the ancient fossil was brought to light. This is so important. Making archaeology, where possible, accessible to the public, to be there with trained experts. I love it. I love it. Well done, Jude. Well done. An ancient wooden spear found in Germany may, we think, have been wielded by Neanderthals. This complete spears made of spruce and pine are among the oldest known hunting weapons, discovered in a coal mine 2 decades ago with the remains of 50 horses. Previous estimates dated the spears to 300,000 years ago, but new analysis suggests that they are in fact younger, about 200,000 years ago. This new age hunting weapon may therefore have been Neanderthal used rather than what they thought before. Recent work suggests that some Neanderthals mixed and mated with early humans. The balanced, well-crafted spears could help scientists understand what Neanderthals were capable of and how they worked together to hunt. It's not yet clear why the new dating disagrees with previous estimates. Archaeologist Thomas Terberger with the University of Göttingen said more research is needed to be sure of the spear's age and who used them to hunt. For the moment, I find the arguments interesting, but not absolutely convincing. Terberger didn't have anything to do with the new study. So we'll see as more, I suppose, double checking, peer review happens. Archaeologists have discovered hundreds of metal objects up to 3,400 years old in a mysterious volcanic hilltop in Hungary. Ancient people in Hungary hid at least 6 metal hoards around a mysterious settlement on a lone hill as early as the 15th century BCE. In just 1 year, researchers using metal detectors identified over 300 artifacts from the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age, including jewellery, military decorations, and weapons. The oldest late Bronze Age finds date back to between 1400 and 1300 BCE. This is according to a study published in the journal Antiquity. In addition to metal assemblages, they found beads, fabric, leather remains, as well as boar and domestic pig tusks. This is taking place at Somló, a volcanic hill in western Hungary. The region is primarily known today for wine production. The artifacts discovered by farmers and viticulturists included jewellery, weapons, and bronze vessels. The amount and quality of the findings indicated a significant human presence between the 13th and 6th centuries BCE. Earlier finds nearby include early Iron Age grave goods found in monumental burial mounds. prompting some research to speculate that prominent landmarks such as Somlo were the seats of power of an elite class of warrior leaders. As such, Seuss and his colleagues and volunteers launched a new archaeological investigation. These included, quote, extensive metal detector and field walking surveys, as well as LiDAR, in which lasers are shot from an aircraft to map the land's topography. So I think we might hear about some more stuff coming out of this, which I think would be very interesting. Clue is talking about a park near me has several community digs that have involved local primary schools. They've turned up a few things from as far back as the 10th century and as recent as World War II. I think if we want to excite young people about learning and about history, but actually about learning in general, because you know, archaeology isn't just about history, it's about, you know, learning about sediments and soil and the geography, and but also the history, but on top of that, learning about the techniques of manufacturing things. Essentially, if we want excited, interested children who don't see learning as a time discrete activity that takes place between 9:15 and 3:15 or whenever your schools run for, I think the best thing we can do is get kids outside doing things more and more. The less time people spend sat on their bottoms, and the more time they spend, particularly when they're young, doing stuff that teaches them things, going to museums, being interested, and also doing things that don't just happen in school hours, you know, and of course that's going to be on the families, not the teachers, but making learning into something that you do throughout your life, I just think is really vitally important. And having my boys and seeing their friends, something I've noticed is that my eldest is starting school in September, and that child, somehow, the more he runs, the more energy he has. It's like the earth is powering him by some kind of weird osmosis. I don't know what's happening, but I am concerned about how capable he is of sitting down to learn. Because I see when he watches TV, he does learn the entire script of films that he can then repeat verbatim, songs included. It's a lot of Disney, I'm not going to lie. He does it standing up. He knows the words because he dances along. And I think for so many children, particularly children like me who were undiagnosed dyslexics, I think I would have gotten so much better if I'd been able to stand up and walk about. It's no surprise to me that I did really well in resistant materials DT, because for the most part, you're standing up and walking about while you're learning because you're using various tools, but also you're learning with your hands as well. So yeah, I think there needs to be, it still needs a bit of an overhaul. When I take over the world, people have been saying, I saw some comments about me being democratically elected. That's sweet. I'm a despot in the making. When I take over the world, I'll fix it. I'll fix schooling. So, Oxford archaeologist has figured out some hidden optical secrets in the Parthenon, and we've got some mock-ups here. And there's also, in this article that is linked, there is, as you can see, a linked video. And this study and these digital builds that have been done, we can clearly see how they think the light would have worked. So the morning of the Pantheonaic festival, sunlight enters through the temple door, reflecting off the statue and shimmering in the pools of water. So, I mean, that picture in the middle, you would have felt that you were in the presence of the divine, I think. You know, as the door opens, it goes from relative darkness into this flaming golden light. Incredible. Chloe asks, do they have standing desks and pedal desks in schools now? I've only been around primary schools, and granted, lots of primary schools do have outdoor learning. Certainly around my area, forest school is a big thing. So kids learning out in nature, and I think it's absolutely wonderful, teaching them to plant a garden, and also lots of play-based learning, and then small moments of focus where you're sat on a desk doing something like your phonics or whatever. But I'm not sure if there are standing desks and pedal desks, and maybe for older kids, but I haven't been around any secondary schools recently. They come to me when I'm teaching secondary school students, so I don't get to see it. Prime Minister Cat, in teaching history in schools, there would definitely be some parents that wrote to me. I was sitting with some of my neighbours' kids, and they are in primary school, and we were talking, and somehow I did end up explaining to them what a lobotomy was and how it would be done in the past. And I did have to then go up to their parents after and be like, so sorry, somehow we got into the topic of lobotomies, and so now your kid knows that that's a thing. So I fear that there'll be some traumatized. To be fair, those kids were super interested by my lobotomy knowledge. But equally, I fear that I should not be in charge of education. Their parents weren't too bothered either. Marianne, it's Gabriel Timmy. Gabriel is he is a dobber. He is. If somebody has said something he doesn't like, or if somebody's pushed him, he feels absolutely no qualms about marching up to their adult and just being like, so and so just done so and so. He's like, not at all. But mostly he thinks he's the boss of everybody and everything. And he also thinks that anything you tell him has to happen is open for discussion, negotiation, debate, bartering. So you cannot, with that child, God love him, you cannot autopilot even for a second, because if he talks you into a back alley where he finds a loophole to get what he wants, you'll never hear the end of it. It's like a steel trap. Bearing in mind he's 4. He's 4, and he debates me like we're at Cambridge. Sometimes you just need a nap. An 1800-year-old horse is embroidered with grave goods that suggests a deep bond between a Roman soldier and his steed. Sarah just said, I had to explain to my 5-year-old nibbling what a heart attack is. He pretended to tell his grandpa he'd probably have one soon. Oi, Yvonne! Yep. Well, we watched The Lion King, and then Gabby went into daycare and was talking about people getting killed because Scar blames Simba for killing his dad. Yeah. He is still an Elsa fan. He's also, but sometimes at the moment, Moana 2 is currently sort of pipping it to the post, although the thing that has currently utterly gripped him is Wallace and Gromit, particularly the character of Feathers McGraw, the criminal penguin. Everything is about Feathers McGraw. We somehow have accumulated a whole collection of criminal penguins in our house that do all sorts of things, and when they do things that shouldn't be done, i.e. when Gabriel does something that shouldn't be done, it's Feathers McGraw that said it, or Feathers McGraw did it. So yeah, we're currently in an Aardman animation phase. We'll see. Right, so roughly 1800 years ago, a Roman cavalry horse died of unknown causes. The animal's human rider, a Roman soldier, buried the creature in a shallow grave. As a parting gift, a soldier tucked a few mementos into the crook of one of the horse's legs, 2 jugs and a small oil lamp, items commonly associated with human graves in Roman cultures. The scenario likely played out nearly 2 millennia ago in what is now southern Germany. This was discovered last summer when there was plans for construction of a new housing development. In this dig, they found about more than 100 horse skeletons, all from around the 2nd century CE. The horses did not die at the same time from some major event like disease or a battle. They died one at a time, probably from illnesses or injuries that prevented them from fulfilling their duties in the military. Archaeologists think that if a horse could still walk, it was likely led to the location of a cemetery and then euthanized on site so that soldiers didn't have to drag its heavy body. The body of an adult man was also found among the horses. He was lying on his stomach without any grave goods. Seemingly, he was an outsider buried with little care. This is not the first time that equine remains have been found in the area. As early as the 1920s, crews building residential buildings found equine skeletons and began referring to the area as a Roman horse cemetery. The archaeologists think that they have only just scratched the surface. They suspect the cemetery was larger than the area they had excavated. And the hope is that they'll be able to study the remains to determine the horse's sex, age, size, cause of death, overall health, so they can learn about how Romans kept, fed, and bred their animals. A Viking brooch, the only silver one found in England. A rare 9th century brooch, been linked to the greatest Viking silver treasure found outside of Russia. It was found near Braintree in October 2023. The coroner has, unsurprisingly, declared it to be treasure. It was also, quote, the only substantial silver example of this brooch type known from England. So this was located, I think a metal detectorist found it, but the Essex Files liaison officer, Laurie Rogerson, said it's the first solid evidence of Viking activity in that part of the country. She said that the believed to be the incomplete brooch was post-medieval. She looked through all her resources, circulated it through the curators, but no one could claim it for their period in history. She was looking at various hoards and fragments, and then she thought, hang on, it looks just like this thing, which is the Kerdale hoard. Mrs. Rogerson's research revealed there were 2 other complete examples of the brooch, one found in Denmark, the other in the Netherlands. Quote, it's so rare we don't have anything like it on the British Museum's Portable Antiquities database. The discovery has also shed light on Viking movements in that part of Essex. We know they navigated the River Blackwater during the Battle of Malden in AD 991, so the site of the find would have been a strategic one. The Braintree Museum hopes to acquire the brooch. Yes, there are Viking hoards. I think it's the only, the direct quote is, quote, the only substantial silver example of this brooch type known from England. So it's the first silver item. It's apparently the first, they are saying, the most substantial type of brooch of this kind from England. Marianne, other silver hoards are mostly hack silver. Brian, have brooches ever been out of fashion? No, they haven't, but the complexity of them is wildly different. This does look to be a very complex heavily detailed brooch. For example, if you've got a cape and you need to close it with a brooch, all you really need is a circle and a pin. It doesn't even have to be joined. So for it to be this, I think it's the elaborate nature of this that makes it. But as more information comes out, I'm sure it will. I will update. Sutton Hoo bucket. I don't know why I'm saying that. Gives me a little giggle. Sutton Hoo bucket, believed to be a cremation vessel. This is a 6th century Byzantine. Whatever you take, you pay your money, you take your choice, how you pronounce it. This has been pieced back together. It's believed to have been a cremation vessel. This was discovered at Sutton Hoo in 1986. Fragments of it, with more fragments found in 2012 and last year. They've then pieced it back together. They revealed that cremated human and animal bones were found within the base of the bucket, with the human remains believed to have been an important person in the community. Not sure how they know this, but let's find out. The National Trust archaeologist Angus Wainwright is hopeful to uncover more information about this very special burial. The TV show Time Team found pieces of this bucket last year as part of a 2-year research project. The copper alloy bucket, decorated with a hunting scene, is thought to have been made several decades before the famous Sutton Hoo ship, and its treasures were buried at the site. The human bones found in last year's dig included part of an ankle bone and a fragment of a skull. They could not determine the sex, but they hoped that ancient DNA from the owner might have survived on an unburnt comb that was discovered. Quote, "We know that this bucket would have been a rare and prized possession back in Anglo-Saxon times, but it's always a mystery as to why it was buried. Now we know it used to contain the remains of an important person in the Sutton Hoo community. I'm hopeful that further analysis will uncover more information about this very special burial." Helen Geek, who is Time Team's Anglo-Saxon expert, said the puzzle of the bucket had finally been solved. Quote, "It's a remarkable mixture, a vessel from southern classical world containing the remains of a very northern, very Germanic cremation. It epitomizes the strangeness of Sutton Hoo. It has ship burials, horse burials, mound burials, and now bath bucket burials. Who knows what else it might still hold." And the Sutton Hoo findings, the Time Team documentary, 4-part, titled The Sutton Hoo Dig, is available on YouTube. And as you can see in this article, it is linked. And we're doing some Hyacinth Bouquet shenanigans. Hyacinth Bouquet, Lady of the House speaking. Bouquet residents. I loved that show when I was a kid. Oh, Leona, Onslow and Daisy. Bless Onslow and Daisy. Cut price Magna Carta copy, now believed to be genuine. This is the one that was bought by Harvard Law School in 1946 for $27.50. They quote this as being about £7. I think it's like $5 something in modern money. I'm not sure. They've paid that for it in 1946, and for years it remained tucked away in its library. Its true identity unknown. So I think, so in modern money, $27.50 is about $450 something today. Either way, very cheap for Magna Carta. They, having reassessed it, they now think that this is one of the Edward I charters from 1300. So this is the reissuing by King John's son, Edward I. So a year has been spent researching this document, and they believe that this is the Magna Carta from the town of Appleby in Cumbria. A London bookseller paid £42 for the documentary months before Harvard bought it for a fraction of that price. As for its value today, Professor Vincent said, quote, "I would hesitate to suggest a figure, but the 1297 Magna Carta that sold at auction in New York in 2007 fetched about $21 million, which was about £10.5 million at the time. So we are talking a very large sum of money. This document is badly faded in places. Academics worked not from the original, but from pictures obtained using ultraviolet light and spectral imaging. They found the handwriting dimensions were consistent with those 6 previously known 1300 originals. They also checked the text. The wording of Magna Carta evolved over the years. The words in their order needed to be identical to that found in the other 1300 originals. This one passed with flying colours. This was, we're told, quote, the crucial proof. The professors hope that Harvard's Magna Carta will soon be displayed to the public, so its message and significance can be more widely known. And the video that I have been working on for next Friday, funny enough, connects with this, because I am talking about the most valuable / expensive texts on Earth. So there are 15 of them. Start having a think now. Start making your notes as to what you think is going to be in my list of 15. Don't Google it. Don't cheat. Although I had to Google it and cheat, because when I was trying to think about what would be up on the list, I was in some cases vastly wrong as to where things would be and what would be on there. So hopefully you'll enjoy that video, and I'm looking forward, if you can make it, to having a chat about it in the premiere. Hopefully they'll have it on display at the Peabody Museum. Harvard's museums are free. Oh, that's fun. That's fun. Lovely. Steve thought the proof would have been the age of the paper, vellum, parchment it's written on. I wonder if it's too delicate to test. They said they had to do this assessment through scans. So maybe that's why. Also, there have been some things in the past where people have got hold of old vellum from other documents, cleaned it off, and then forged stuff later. Brian, are candlelight suppers a big thing in England? I think they probably were in the 80s and 90s. I don't know anybody who has candlelight suppers now, but then maybe that's because I've got small children. It's just a miracle if you don't leave the table with chips in your hair. Like, if you manage to get away from the table, not covered in somebody's food, you've won. I don't know anybody that owns candles, apart from candles in case it's a blackout. That's about it, really. But, of course, hyacinth bouquet. Loved a candlelight supper. This could have been in Ding Dong, but I've kept it here because I love these. And when we went to the birthplace, Shakespeare's birthplace, I went with my husband, and there's a video of it from years ago on the channel. And we went around Stratford-upon-Avon, and when we went into the birthplace, my husband zeroed in on the bollock dagger, and his favourite thing is that the bollock dagger exists, and one has been discovered at Goldberg Fortress. This is in Sweden. It was constructed by King Birger during the 13th century in present-day Gothenburg. Recent excavations from the State Historical Museums have investigated the last remaining traces of the fortress, and they found a large trove of artifacts and treasures: cannonballs, crossbow bolts, musket balls, and a unique discovery of bollock-shaped daggers known aptly as a bollock dagger. Bollock daggers have a distinctively shaped hilt with 2 oval swellings at the guard resembling male testes or bollocks. According to the report, objects from daily life at the fortress were also unearthed. They had ceramic tableware, beer taps, sundials, a soup cup, another rare find, a sand spreader used to sprinkle fine sand over written text to soak up ink. This is the sand spreader we can see there. I've just seen a text come in from my husband. He's almost definitely going to... He says there's no such thing as a bollock dagger. Well, Jamie, look on screen. I've not faked it. This is not fake news. Quote, we were surprised by how much it survived. The fortification featured a mix of construction methods, Some sections were built with stone and brick. Others appeared to rely on earthen ramparts and timber. The basement was especially remarkable, a well-preserved staircase, flooring, and partitions of the walls and ceiling still intact. But, of course, everybody is mostly interested. I mean, I think the sand spreader is really cool, but when there are bollock daggers on offer, there you go. If you've got a giant cod piece, why not add some bollocks to your dagger? Look, Sid, you're not wrong. You are not. However, let's just remember what the cod piece is for. It is essentially the fly of your trousers. Now, did it ever need to be such a large proboscis of padding? No, it did not. It did not. But it had a purpose above simply being a padded willy on the front of your trousers. Brian, wasn't there a recent discovery about William Shakespeare not abandoning his wife? Yes, so we talked about this in the last History News, a letter that seems to point to the idea that Mrs. Shakespeare may have been in London with William, so thus not abandoned back in Stratford. Julesy, I feel like Bronn from Game of Thrones would have a bollock dagger. He definitely would have a bollock dagger, for sure. For sure. Medusa, do you know what? Size doesn't matter when it comes to daggers, because it is, as is so often the case, what you do with it that counts. Tea Lady Whimsy, imagine Hyacinth Bouquet sing a bollock dagger. Well, she wouldn't call it that, would she? She'd rename it a bollock dagger, a bollock dagger. Excellent. But I like the little sand spreader. London Museum has purchased a bizarre Renaissance painting. Dear God, it is. That features a drooling dog for $22 million. My husband's just pointed out that size matters when it comes to passwords. He works in data protection. Size does matter when it comes to passwords. This, I'm not going to lie, this painting is horrific. The dog in this painting is horrendous. This is the Virgin and Child with the Saints Louis and Margaret. It's from the 16th century. I have never seen this before. It's terrifying. The drooling dragon dog, and there's also, we're told, a small bawdy cherub showing its behind. Where's that then? The provenance of the painting remains a mystery, but there's some guesses about who created it. The National Gallery said the Virgin and Child with St. Louis and Margaret looks like many paintings in its era, but it has got a number of religious symbols. So Mary and Jesus are flanked by the French King Louis IX, known as St. Louis, and St. Margaret. Margaret seems to emerge unperturbed from a drooling green dragon dog. I don't know. A nod to how she was swallowed by a dragon, Satan, and then escaped when her cross irritated the dragon's stomach. There's also, quote, iconic oddities and wildly inventive details. The Virgin and Child are on bare wooden steps, which stand out dramatically in the splendid setting. St. Louis' sceptre has strange, squirming figures, perhaps a symbol of the Last Judgment, while St. Margaret's braided hair, a crown of daisies, and accompanying dove are likewise unusual motifs. There's also an angel playing a mouth harp. The National Gallery notes that this is, quote, a sound hardly associated with celestial harmonies, a rare occurrence in medieval iconography. More obscure and even surprisingly bawdy subjects, including an unruly putto or cherub showing his bottom to the viewer and believed to be farting. What is going on? How bizarre. Despite these strange details, the painting was clearly done by talented artists who aim to dazzle their audience, and art experts who have a few guesses about who the mystery painter might be. Excluding French candidates like Jean Hay, the style of the painting is reminiscent of Netherlandish artifacts like Jan van Eyck, Hugo van der Goes, and especially Jan Gossart. The dramatically foreshortened faces and angels are reminiscent of some of Gossart's early drawings. The gallery can't identify the artist for sure, but they do know it was painted around 1510, because the chain of the Order of St. Michael, worn by St. Louis, was modified in 1516. For now, and perhaps forever, the painting will remain anonymous, but the National Gallery notes it's a good example of art historians' tendency to focus on names, and shows that the late medieval and Renaissance periods, quote, anonymity can intersect with extraordinary quality. The painting is bananas. I love it. I'll have to take a trip to the National Gallery to see it. Emelia, I assume, was the dog not added later and the cheeky cherub? So I assume that they have analysed the elements and they would know if it's been painted over a later date. So I'm assuming not. It's bananas, right? It's kind of cool though, isn't it? It is kind of cool. Steve Clark, lead might not be on the list, but other magic mushrooms. Look, I'm not going to lie. That dragon dog is like a sleep paralysis demon. It is a sleep paralysis demon. I don't know what to tell you. But there we are. If I go check it out, I'll let you know what I think, seeing it up close. Amazing. Danish slave ship wreckage found off the coast of Costa Rica, a museum has confirmed. 2 18th century shipwrecks off the coast of Costa Rica, previously thought to have been pirate ships, have been confirmed to be 2 Danish slave ships. Quote, investigations of ship timbers, bricks from the cargo and clay pipes found during underwater excavations have determined their identity to be 2 vessels shipwrecked in 1710. They were identified as the slave ships Frederica's Quartus and Christianus Quintus, which, according to historical sources, were wrecked off the coast of Central America in 1710. Frederica's Quartus was set on fire, while Christianus Quintus was wrecked in the surf after its anchor line was cut. Until now, it's not been clear why exactly the ships were lost. It's been added that in Costa Rica, it had long been known that 2 wrecks were located in the waters of Chajita National Park. The analysis is very convincing, and we no longer have any doubt these are the wrecks of 2 Danish slave ships. The bricks are Danish, and the same goes for the timbers, which are additionally charred and sooty from a fire. This fits perfectly with historical accounts stating that one of the ships was burned. One of the marine archaeologists who was involved said it was one of the craziest archaeological excavations I've been yet part of, not only because it matters greatly to the local population, but also because it's one of the most dramatic shipwrecks in the history of Denmark. And now we know exactly where it happened. The Danish government banned the transatlantic slave trade in 1792, but the country didn't abolish slavery until half a century later in 1847, according to the museum. So I've been asked in the past, how did people from history embalm bodies? Because there's lots of talk about, various kings and queens from history being embalmed, and they didn't know that Jane Seymour was partially embalmed, or why there was a question about whether Elizabeth would be embalmed. It seemed odd that you could be embalmed, and people have asked, how do they go about embalming? And I'm going to say, not always very well, because we have apparently found this 18th century monk's anus was stuffed with wood chips and fabric to mummify him. I can't imagine this is going to be as effective as a full embalming. The man died of tuberculosis and was preserved in a very unusual way. You can say that again. Wood chips, twigs, and fabric were packed into his abdomen through his anus. People are enjoying the title. I will say I did have to do a double take of this. This is a mummified body found in a church crypt in St. Thomas am Baselstein, which is a small village in Austria near the Danube River. He is known locally as the, quote, air-dried chaplain. What? The mummy was assumed to have been preserved, the preserved remains of a parish vicar named Franz Xaver Sidler von Rosenberg, who died in 1746. Over the years, his remains have been associated with various healing miracles, but the cause of his death remained a mystery. Heightened by an X-ray analysis in 2000 that suggested his mummy contained a poison capsule. There was a study done and published, quote, our investigation uncovered that the excellent preservation status came from an unusual type of embalming, achieved by stuffing the abdomen through the rectal canal with wood chips, twigs, and fabric, and the addition of zinc chloride for internal drying. So we can say what we think about this title and method, but clearly the preservation was extreme and extraordinary. The afterlife of his mummy and the way it was created has baffled researchers. So a small incision was made in the chest wall of this remains, and the team examined the foreign materials found in the body of the mummy: mud, wood chips from spruce and fir trees, branches from unidentified tree species, with swatches of hemp, flax, and silk fabric, along with wooden buttons that presumably adorned the fabric. The round, hollow object that researchers previously believed was a poison capsule was extracted and found to be a glass bead from a rosary. Historically, mummies were created by opening the body's abdominal wall, removing the organs and inserting the packing material. But in this case, the abdomen was intact, leading researchers to conclude that his pelvis was packed via his anus, which they found to be somewhat enlarged. Well, if you've got half of the local woodland up there, I think your anus would be slightly enlarged too. Based on the radiocarbon date of the mummy's skin, the age of death determined from the skeleton, the historical records, researchers concluded that the mummy could indeed be positively identified as Franz Xaver Sidler, who died in St. Thomas's in 1746 at just 37 years old. Most people at this time were not mummified, so it's unclear why Sidler merited this treatment. We have some written evidence that cadavers were prepared for transport or elongated laying out of the dead. Possibly, the vicar was planned for transportation to his home abbey, which might have failed for unknown reasons. It worked. And the fact that it was so successful makes me wonder. It seems odd to us because we haven't located it, but I can't imagine he's the only one. Surely. That's a great point. That is a great point. Maybe they want to have him canonized in the future, so they want to preserve the body. I think it's very interesting that there is chat about miracles happening near his remains, and my limited understanding of how one becomes beatified and a saint is that your corpse, in most cases, all cases, must remain inviolate. So you can't decompose. Jessie, that is a cracking idea. Does Ask a Mortician know about this? I haven't seen a video that she's done about this. Maybe we should make her aware. I mean, it's worked. The remains were preserved. I would love to know what Caitlin Doughty thinks about this. I would love to know. I mean, also, she's definitely got the connections, I'd imagine, that she could get in and ask them. Oh, that would be cool. That would be so cool. I think her channel is so cool, and her books are so cool as well. An unopened Victorian soft drink bottle has been found at a dig. Archaeologists have been excavating a Cambridge car park. They didn't find a king this time. That's where you find kings, under car parks. This is part of a multi-million-pound project to turn the Grafton shopping centre into labs and offices. They found this bottle, believed to be from the 1890s. It's got a squeeze neck, and which still holds the marble inside, which would have helped stop the fizz escaping the bottle. Usually these bottles are broken by children to get the marble out, but this is complete and may have been stored in the basement on a shelf and was never taken out prior to demolition. The archaeologist added he was not sure what some of the buildings at the site were previously used for until they started to dig. One space had a section on the floor that was likely to have held an anvil, as archaeologists found bits of broken metal around it. They said the ground surface was hard worn and there was an area of disturbance in the corner which could represent a location of a forge. My husband's just texted me, I think, about the Caitlin question, and he's just shouting the word collab. He's very keen that I get to meet my heroes. God bless him. So he is very keen for a collab. Me too, babe. Me too. She's so cool. Secrets of Sydney's past have been unlocked after Hunter Street metro station excavation. This is the treasures of early Sydney. Archaeologists have discovered sandstock brick footings from the 1820s to 1840s, believed to be the base for a prominent businessman called John Charles Prosper de Maistre. He grew up in America and he moved to Australia in 1818. Began his working life as a business importer. He went on to be the director of the Bank of New South Wales and his own companies. The team made a discovery near the former De Maistre Place, a laneway just off of George Street. They found gunflint and bullet shells. They found glass beads, an 1834 coin, slate pencils, glass bottles. There's lots of notable finds that have been made, and the city's history is going to be further preserved with the incorporation of the heritage-listed Skinner's Family Hotel, bought in 1845. This metro station is going to be the final stop on a 24-kilometre Sydney Metro West line connecting Parramatta to the Sydney Central Business District from 2032. Special care is being taken to preserve the relics so that future generations can learn more about the Sydney of that era. The Hunter Street Metro project is part of Sydney's future, but these finds, we're told, are a fascinating window into the city's past. How cool is that? So cool. The sale of a $32 million Klimt portrait falls through due to, ding, 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 provenance issues. This sale has fallen through, according to the Austrian paper Der Standard. The painted anonymous buyer in Hong Kong withdrew from the sale last month after a private restitution settlement did not go ahead. This is Klimt's portrait of Fraulein Leicester from 1917. It sold for 30 million euros or 35 million euros with fees. That's $32.15 million, $37.51 million with fees. The sale was still a record for Austria, despite it being lower than the pre-sale estimate. The sale took place in Vienna. The painting was, we're told, previously lost for 100 years, known only from a black and white photo taken in 1925. There are gaps in the provenance from around, you guessed it, World War II. This resulted in the auction house working to arrange a settlement between the consignor, a private Austrian citizen, and the heirs of the Laser family for a share of the sale. The consignor of this portrait inherited the painting in 2022, but the decades between 1925, when the black and white photograph showed the artwork in the possession of the Laser family, and 1961, when it was recorded in the possession of the consignor's family, were unclear. It's worth noting that in this period includes the Anschluss, when Austria was annexed by Nazi Germany between 1938 and 1945, and Austria's Jewish population were persecuted, and hundreds of thousands were forced to emigrate. So there is disputes over the identity of the sitter of this portrait, as well as multiple claimants to ownership of the painting before and after its sale, all of which have led the anonymous buyer attempting to negotiate indemnification settlements, frankly, as you would, with the known heirs of Adolf and Henriette Leicester for 60% of the sale proceeds. Almost all of these agreements between buyer and various heirs were successfully obtained. One ultimately refused to sign a deal, resulting in the painting sale failing. The Standard also estimated that the cost to the Imklinski auction house for the failed sale were likely to amount to at least 1.5 million euros or $1.7 million. Look, if I, which I don't, had $32 million to spare, this is exactly, I would love to own a piece like this, but believing the things I believe about repatriation and the necessity for things being visible to the public and belonging to the public, I would not want to get embroiled in this under any circumstances. If I couldn't get that indemnification that didn't leave me or my heirs vulnerable to accusations and to loss of funds and to various things, yeah, I can totally see why you just go, yeah, no, we're putting the plug on this for sure. And this is the thing. This is why I think repatriation is going to push forward, because who wants to get involved? Who wants to put their money where this particular maelstrom of a disaster lives? We've got some shinies. Oh, look at the shinies. So we've got jewels here. Nearly 1,800 pearls, rubies, sapphires, and patterned gold sheets. A cache of dazzling jewels linked to the Buddha's mortal remains will go under the hammer at Sotheby's in Hong Kong. For over a century, these relics, unearthed from a dusty mound in northern India in 1898, have been largely unseen, cradled, odd word, by a private British collection. Hoarded, I probably would go with hoarded, but okay. These gems are going to leave the custody of their keepers. They are stirring not just the collector's appetites, but also some unease. I'm just going to say, the way that little bit of text was written, I see what you're doing. They were in a dusty mound in northern India, largely needed protecting from the dusty mound of India, but they've been cradled in a British collection. Okay. Pee in my pocket and tell me it's raining. Blimey, that is some double speak propaganda. Dear oh dear. Anyway, they are stirring not just the collector's appetites, but also some unease. I bet they are. I bet they're stirring unease. What? They come from a glittering hoard of nearly 1,800 pearls, rubies, topaz, sapphires, patterned gold sheets, first glimpsed inside a brick chamber in present-day Uttar Pradesh in India, near the Buddha's birthplace. The discovery, alongside bone fragments identified by an inscribed urn belonging to the Buddha himself, reverberated through the world of archaeology. It's been described as among the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of all time. Now, these relics face the glare of the auction room. Experts tell the BBC that a question hangs heavy. Can the sale of treasures so intimately woven into India's sacred past be considered ethical? This is grave robbing. This is a grave robbery. A grave was robbed. A grave was robbed. In 1898, William Claxton Pepe, an English estate manager, excavated a stupa at Pirapawa, just south of Lumbini, where Buddha is believed to have been born. He uncovered relics inscribed and consecrated nearly 2,000 years ago. Historians agree that these relics, intact until then, are the heritage of both the Buddhist Sakya clan descendants and Buddhists worldwide. So they probably shouldn't be in a for-profit auction room, then should they? Sorry. The bone relics have since been distributed to countries such as Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, where they continue to be venerated. So the bones, but not the gems. Okay. Are the relics of the Buddha a commodity that can be treated like a work of art to be sold on the market? And since they aren't, how is the seller ethically authorized to auction them? It's a great question. It is a great question, babe. The sale of the relics has also sparked concern among Buddhist leaders. Yes, quote, the Buddha teaches us not to take other people's possession without permission. Historical records indicate that the Sakamuni clan were granted custody of these relics as the Buddha emanated from their community. Their wish was for these relics to be preserved alongside adornments such as these gems, so they may be venerated in perpetuity by the Buddha's followers. Chris Pepe has written that the jewels passed from his great uncle to his cousin, and in 2013 came to him and two other cousins. That's when he began researching the discovery by his great grandparents. Quote, this is from Chris Pepe. The colonization of India by the British had been a source of some cultural shame for me and continues to be. But amidst the treasure hunters who hauled their finds back to England, there had also been people focused on the pursuit of knowledge. He noticed his research revealed a lot about his ancestors who are dismissed as prejudiced Victorians from a bygone era. I learned that Willie Pepe's first wife chose to travel around India for her honeymoon and loved the country and its culture. Sadly, she died from unspecified illness. I learned that my grandmother was outraged at the land laws that applied to Indian women. I learned the excavation of the stupa was an attempt by Willie Pepe to provide work for his tenant farmers who had fallen victim to the famine of 1897. You could, babe, have just given them cash. He writes his great-grandfather's technical diagrams of ramps and pulleys suggest that he was also a trained engineer who couldn't resist a project. I'm sure, though, that the fact that there was shiny, shiny gems in there was just a coinky-dink, a little coinky-dinky. William Pepe handed the gems, reliquaries to the colonial Indian government. The bone relics went to the Buddhist king of Siam. 5 relic urns and a stone chest and most other relics went to the Indian Museum in Kolkata. Only a small portion of duplicates, which he was allowed to keep, remained in the Pepe family, he notes. Sources told the BBC the auction house considered the duplicates to be original items, considered surplus to those donated, which the Indian government permitted Pepe to retain. Over the past 6 years, the gems have featured in major exhibitions, one at the Met in 2023. The Pepe family has also launched a website to share our research. Some scholars argue that Buddha relics should never be treated as market commodities. Chris Pepe told the BBC that in all monasteries he had visited, quote, no Buddhists regard these as corporeal relics. No, because they're gemstones. So obviously they aren't corporeal relics, are they? Because they're gemstones. That doesn't mean they aren't grave goods and sacred. Of course they're not corporeal. A few Buddhist academics at Western universities have recently offered convoluted, fact-defying logic whereby they may be regarded as such. It's an academic construct that is not shared by Buddhists in general who are familiar with the details of the find. Okay. Pepe said the family, quote, looked into donation of the relics to temples and museums, and they all presented different problems on closer scrutiny. Which problems? Which problems did they? Which problems? An auction seems to be the fairest and most transparent way to transfer these relics to Buddhists, and we are confident that Sotheby's will achieve that. What? If the Buddhists have the most money, then what? Some also point to the Koh-i-Noor, seized by the British East India Company, now part of the Crown Jewels, with many Indians viewing it as stolen. Should the Buddha's jewels be next? Repatriation, I believe, is seldom necessary, says Aju Uja. Such rare and sacred relics are unique and which define a land's cultural history, however, deserve the government's exceptional attention. My gosh. Does the Pepe family perhaps have massive ties to media? Because it feels like it. Wow. Do you know what? I'm going to move on, because that I can actually feel my blood pressure has raised through that. Wow. I'm not wrong. That was some extraordinary writing there. Right? And the double speak about that corporeal remains. I'm sure that most Buddhists don't recognize gemstones as corporeal remains. But they can still be not sellable on the global marketplace. And I really don't like that kind of first narrative about how they were almost rescued from the dusty, dirty ground of India to be cradled in some English, I'm assuming, manor house or some nonsense. So what was the exact word? Cradled by a private British collection, saved from dirty, dusty Indian soil. And I don't know what the duplicate items are. And does that mean that there are gemstones elsewhere that aren't part of this collection? I don't like it. It makes me very cross and a bit sweaty. I'll be honest. That's giving me the rage. That's giving me the fury sweats. I get fear sweats, anxiety sweats, and rage sweats. This is giving me the rage sweats. Growl. Venal ingredient. It feels allegedly, because these feel like people that might be litigious. Marianne, no two gems. I don't know what this thing about. Yeah, because as Jessie said, that's in the article and in the Pepe website, but I don't know. It's not clear to me from this article what it means by duplicate. I don't know, because as you rightly say, no two gems are duplicates. I don't like it. Stamps, friends. Let's move on to stamps before I have some form of embolism. Guernsey Post has issued a new set of stamps depicting archaeological finds unearthed in the Bailiwick. The Postal Service said there's going to be a series of 6 stamps that reflected this year's Europa theme of national archaeological discoveries. There's a silver coin found in Sark in 1719. This is got the Atavella Vlatos, once a ruler of the Remy tribe of northern France. There's another one that features the standing stone of Grand-Mère du Chimerique at the gate of St. Martin's Churchyard. State archaeologist Dr. Philip de Jerzy, who assisted the Philatelic Bureau with the stamps, said that he celebrated the Bailiwick's extraordinarily rich archaeological history. 2 Europa stamps in the set contain an ancient carving from the bonded store in St. Peter's Port and an early jug fragment discovered by divers in the St. Peter's Port harbour. These stamps, Guernsey Post said these stamps are available for pre-order ahead of their issue date from the 1st of May. So they're out. They're out. This one, perhaps you can help. Can you identify the photographer who captured these images of 1960 San Francisco? Do any of these look familiar to you? This includes things like students protesting the Vietnam War, body-painted pedestrians gathered in Golden Gate Park, Muhammad Ali speaking out against the draft, a young short-haired Carlos Santana playing the guitar. These are late 1960s San Francisco. Nobody knows who took these photographs. There are 2,042 processed 35mm color slide and 102 rolls of labeled black and white film inside a plastic garbage bag. There are some 8,417 photos. They've changed hands several times throughout the years. In 2022, they were purchased by a commercial photographer, Bill Dezell, who runs an educational non-profit called Speak Local. And basically, there's a hunt on to try and figure out who took these. Now, maybe there is somebody in this chat who is old enough to have been the person that took these, but I think most likely it's going to be a parent or maybe even a grandparent of somebody in the chat. Presumably, this person, if this is in the late 60s, and the locations that a person is going to, this is probably going to be somebody who is at least in their late teens, possibly their early 20s, I think at the youngest. So we're looking for somebody who's presumably born in the 40s. So we need someone who's born in the 40s. MLR, my guess would be it's a newspaper reporter in that era. It's a lot of photographs. So it's somebody who is clearly prolific at taking these photographs, but it's presumably somebody's mum or dad or uncle or whatever else. And maybe, just maybe, they know who was taking these. It would be so cool, I think, to find the person who did so. So I'm just sharing it in case any of these images, in case this article sparks anybody's interest. And maybe they could, maybe somebody's got some pictures that look like they were taken on the same day. Maybe. Why were they all in the bag? Who got rid of them? Did somebody, when these were all dumped in some bag, they were discovered in the early 1980s. They were found inside a plastic garbage bag. So somebody, here's my conspiracy speculation. We've got somebody who took these photos who was probably born in the 40s. I think they either had to move out, they got sick, or maybe they passed away in the 80s and somebody cleared out their house or flat or whatever. So In the 80s, do you know, you or a family member or a friend, did you pack away a bunch of your friend or relative's photographic stuff, film rolls, negatives, etc., into a bin bag and clear it out? Did you do that in the 1980s? Because if you did, or if you know someone who did, then fortunately these photos have been saved. But what it also points to is that you might know who took these photographs. Jessie's put something that I hadn't considered. San Francisco in the 60s, thrown out in the 80s. It potentially could be somebody who died during that wave of HIV and AIDS. Or manned a newspaper dumped their archive when they went under, maybe. Sadly, if it's San Francisco in the 80s, put in a garbage bag, the photographer might have been a victim of the AIDS crisis with no family. But somebody put those photographs in that bag, and somebody might remember doing that. Somebody might remember doing that. So there's an attempt or a desire to host this as a photography exhibition, and it would be great, I think, if we could find out who had taken them. I mean, I think it's going to be, I can see all the ways it might be really hard, but somebody put all this photographic stuff, and it's a lot. So if you put this much photographic stuff into a bin bag, it is something you'd remember. Because it's not just like a couple of photo albums. We are talking thousands of things that go on to create photographic images. You would remember doing this. Maybe you were paid to do it because a landlord needed their flat back. Maybe you were paid to do it, but you remember where it was from, and we might be able to trace that way. I don't know if this is an acronym that gets used in acronym. Do we say BAMPFA, or do we say the full BAMPFA, or do we call it BAMPFA? So they have lost a federal grant to conserve its prized African American quilt collection. We're being told that the executive order from last month, gutting funding from museums and other cultural institutions, is being felt locally in the loss of this federal grant for BAMFA, if that's what we say about it. They help to preserve an extensive collection of African American quilts. We're told it's a very big undertaking to conserve and photograph 3,000 quilts. Of course it is. We feel very responsible and honoured to be stewards of this collection. These are national treasures. The museum holds the largest collection of African American quilts in the world, which makes up 1/5 of its total holdings. It includes over 500 works by Rosie Lee Tompkins, a former Richmond resident and one of the nation's leading fabric artists. It also includes quilts by Laverne Brackens, R.B. Williams, and Gladys Henry, all renowned quilters who use scraps of old clothing, blankets, and other fabric to create intricate designs using skills gleaned from mothers, grandmothers, and other female relatives. And the examples we're seeing here are so beautiful, and they tell such beautiful and heartfelt stories. And the massive issue is that fabric and fibers take so much to preserve. Like the specialist settings, all of the things that need to be done to preserve these items, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to keep fabric in one piece. This is really hard work. We're told, of course, it's not the only Bay Area museum that's been impacted by the recent cuts. The Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco lost at least $736,000 in federal grants. These funds were used to support the museum's Emerging Artist Program, which provides exhibition opportunities and professional development to local Black artists They've also got an art education initiative serving the Bay Area. I don't know what to say about this. Many of the quilts that they are now scrambling to preserve were inherited as a result of a bequest in 2019 from the estate of Eli Leon, an Oakland psychotherapist who amassed thousands of quilts by hundreds of 20th century quilt makers through his lifetime. It was donated to Bamford, which has since then staged several shows featuring the quilts. This collection goes back to the 1860s. It reflects the artistic expression and creativity of hundreds of African American women. It's a really important part of American history. Conserving quilts is laborious and time intensive, as I said, because they were part of day-to-day lives. They are exposed to dirt, sweat, mold, insects, all sorts of substances that can degrade their quality. Now that the funding's been lost, the painstaking work of preserving and cataloguing the quilt is at risk of being delayed by many years unless alternate sources of funding can be found. UC Berkeley has agreed to fund the quilt conservation through December, after which the museum will lean on other sources of funding to protect the collection. Is it still a case that charitable donations are a tax write-off? Is that still a thing? Because if it is, I would suggest, if you can, putting your money where it will most annoy this administration. So that is a new news that borders on the ding-dong area, because there's some ding-dong behaviour in the background of this. Marianne, yes, you can write off charitable donations. Look, if there's any daddy warbuckses in the chat that recognise, as I'm sure, if you're here, I'm sure you do, the value and the necessity of conserving stuff like this, donate in such a way that it would give himself the rage. Do that. Comply maliciously, annoy as much as you possibly can. We're on to ding dong times. A child has damaged a Rothko at a Rotterdam museum. Look, this is one of these things where I take my kids to museums and heritage sites. I take them frequently. I think it's really important. Every time I do so, my primal fear is that one of them, in some way, shape, or form, will break, touch, lick, destroy something irreplaceable. So I cannot imagine how terrible the adults connected to this child must feel. On the flip side, why weren't you? Why was this allowed to happen? Because, okay, here's what's happened. This Rothko painting, housed in Rotterdam, was damaged by a child who made small scratches on the work. This incident occurred when Grey Orange on Maroon number 8 from 1960 was on display in the depot, a publicly accessible storage facility located inside the main museum. The damage is only superficial, but scratches are visible in the unvarnished paint layer in the lower part of the painting. They are researching treatment for the painting. It's unclear who's going to pay for the repairs and conservation work. The museum has provided no information on the valuation of the painting or the possible costs associated with the conservation of the painting or the further handling of this matter. A marketing manager at the art restoration company told the BBC that the attack, I mean, let's not call it an attack. It's a little kid. I don't think it was deliberate. Has implications for other museums due to open up their collections, including the V&A, which is going to launch V&A East Storehouse. They ask, how will this event affect other UK institutions who are opening up their archives in the same way? I did see other commentary on this that talked about how this painting is visibly textured, and thus the sort of thing that would be deeply attractive for a child to give a little squishy scratch to. Where my kid loves when there are paintings on the walls, and particularly when they have like a texture. So I get it. I get why the child was attracted to it. However, a touch with a finger, you should have seen that. That should have been being there long enough to create squishy scratches on the canvas, multiple squishy scratches. Oh, no. Oh, no. That's a touch is bad, but a touch can happen even when you're being vigilant. They're long enough to create multiple squishy scratches. Loss of concentration. That's a loss of concentration right there, I'm going to say. But equally, if I was that parent, I would be mortified. Mortified. Ooh. Ding dong number 2. An American tourist climbed over the fence at the Colosseum and impaled himself on a spike. This would have really hurt. He was left dangling and screaming in pain. This took place at 5 p.m. So presumably he wasn't even half cut. So it wasn't like 11 o'clock at night. He was climbing over to get a closer look and fell and was essentially skewered on the bars of the fence. He was screaming and bleeding profusely, and then he became unconscious. Like, this is... An ambulance found that he was rushed to the scene and found that he'd suffered a severe injury to his lower back that was preventing him from moving. They gave him a sedative and then detached him and then put a tight bandage on the wound. Like, he could have died from this. Like, what is the thinking? If there's a fence there, props there for a reason. It took about 20 minutes to detach and stabilize this tourist. Another tourist said that it was terrible. He saw the man impaled and that he couldn't free himself. This person's identity has not been released, I think, justifiably so. But in addition to being called an American, he was also apparently a resident of Taiwan. Unclear what's happening. And he could, of course, be an American who lives in Taiwan. This is referred to as perhaps the bloodiest incident involving American tourists at the monument, but far from the first. We have talked about some of those. Count Balerian of House Tatters, thank you very much for the super sticker. Most kind of you. Thank you. Marianne Rose, do people actually think I don't think so? Well, clearly not, because this sounds like it was a grown adult. Like a grown... Sorry, 47. A 47-year-old man. Look, I'm knocking 40. And as I mentioned at the start of this, my child's high chair tried to take off my little toe. In fact, it had malicious intent, this high chair. It's got plans. It may, in fact, be a haunted object. I know that at a certain point, I will be approaching the position where I no longer fall over. I have a fall. There is no way that... And also, I don't drink anymore. Maybe if I still drank, I would. But I don't drink anymore. And I haven't done for 15 odd years. Maybe when I was half cut, I might be like, I can definitely climb that fence. But sober? At my big age? At his big age? We aren't climbing fences, babes. We aren't. Surely we aren't climbing fences in our 30s, 40s and beyond. Sure, that sort of nonsense is like teens, early 20s. Surely. The Colosseum Colosseum craves blood. It was deliberate. He was sacrificing his blood because the Colosseum craves blood. Julesy asked, was alcohol involved? I don't know. It did happen at 5 p.m. on a Friday. So possibly. I mean, how lit can you get? Steve Clark says, fence climbing, stuff you do as kids, breaking scrapyards. I didn't say this was me. Yeah, look, we've all climbed into parks and out of parks in our teens, early 20s. We've all done stupid stuff before our frontal lobe was developed. But at 47? No. No. Piscean Beauty, perhaps even a day drinking. Look, maybe. In some ways that makes it less awful. If he was drunk, there's an excuse, maybe. I don't know. But however, it's the shenanigans don't stop there. Look at this absolute clown. Right. A vandal has daubed a penis on the wall of a centuries-old Peruvian city recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. This chucklehead has not been identified, but he is caught on video. The Ministry of Culture said the culprit, quote, showed a grave disrespect towards our history and cultural heritage, as well as a violation of the regulations that protect archaeological sites. The video has been shared on social media. The culprit could get up to 6 years in prison if caught. This is a spray paint attack that comes just months after a man chipped the 12 angle stone, a famous Incan artifact in the city of Cusco. So they haven't identified this clown. If anybody thinks they recognize this person, I don't tend to be one to say snitch. Snitch. He spray painted a willy on an ancient site in Peru. Snitch. Snitch. Sing, if you think you know who this clown is, sing like a canary. Sing like a canary. We're not done though. There's more ding dongs. Yeah, Leona, exactly. Just like the absolute bum faces, Sycamore Gap. If you're going to do something wrong, don't record it or get it recorded. Look, also, as I'm going to be teaching my kids, the second you step out of your front door, everybody has a almost everybody has a high definition camera on their person. We live in London, one of the highest rates of CCTV, I believe, on earth. Assume you are being videoed and assume that if you do nonsense, I'm going to see it on my TikTok before you can get home. A willy on a proven site, someone has to know who it is. Watch this video. Someone out there will recognize who this person is by their walk, by something or other. It looks like a fairly good resolution video. Snitch. Snitch. And I would never normally say that, but in this case, snitch. Snitcheroo. Meanwhile, smugglers busted near a Turkish castle for trying to steal a Roman mosaic. The group, guess what? Live streamed their attempted heist of this 2,000-year-old artwork. Oh, do I need to make mugs? Don't film your history crimes. Don't film your history crimes. Or actually do, because then we don't have to go to the trouble of finding out who you are because you told us. Chucklehead. Here's a tip. Do not live stream your illegal excavation of Roman ruins near a Turkish castle. Turkish authorities and actual archaeologists do not approve of this activity, even if you happen to uncover a 2,000-year-old mosaic dedicated to the ancient Greco-Roman concept of luxury and decadence. So, fortunately, they have found this, and now it's being studied, which is very interesting. More on that, I'm sure, as stuff comes out. They think the mosaic must be related to the ruins in the lower city of Zile. It was known that this was an important centre in ancient times, with its ancient theatre, castle, stepped tunnel, rock tomb, and Sakea festival. More analysis is needed to accurately date and assess the mosaic, but this discovery, we believe, will help to expand the excavation scope, and the experts will get an ability to better contextualise the history of this location. However, the Turkish government have spent decades trying to rein in the black market antiquities trade. Earlier this year, authorities arrested a group after allegedly finding a smuggled medieval mummy in their home. In 2022, a single raid generated the arrest of 162 suspected smugglers across 38 provinces. During that bust, nicknamed Operation Heritage, one truck alone contained 1,736 stolen artifacts that were destined for a British auction house. Good that the mosaic has been found. Well done for live streaming it, because that way you've been caught. You fools. Let's hop in to our events and exhibitions. I've only got 2 for you, so we'll just jump straight in. First up, this is in Chicago. This is the first homosexuals, the birth of a new identity, 1869 to 1939. This is going to the 22nd of July, 2025. I'm just going to have to put up Jules's comment about the British Auction House to be cradled in the British Museum. That's going to be our euphemism from now on. Loving this looted artifact was lovingly cradled in the protective bosom of this active crime scene. Those tiles were rescued by those perps from the dirty Roman ground. I mean the dirty Turkish ground, and they even took the trouble to film it so we could see it happening. Heroes. They should be allowed to cradle those stones themselves. So this is Chicago. This is an exhibition looking at various things about essentially going up to the development and the understanding of the term homosexual, what happened prior to the existence and understanding of that term. This is at Wrightwood 659. So it looks like a fabulous exhibition. So in this piece here, you've got Alice Austen's The Darned Club from 1891. If you do get a chance to check out this exhibition, let me know what you think, and I will share it if I can. Now, and last but by no means least, we have got a John Singer Sargent exhibition going on at Kenwood, which is it's in Greater London. It's on the outskirts of London. This is an exhibition entitled Heiress, Sargent's American Portraits. These are the stories behind the American women who crossed the Atlantic to marry British aristocrats in exchange of money for titles. These women include a wartime nurse and the first sitting female MP. So definitely worth checking out. That is what I have for you. Whew! 2.5 hours. The rage sweat is in evidence. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me if you've been watching live. Thank you also if you are watching on the playback. And I really look forward to seeing what gets sent to me for news next time. And I look forward to putting up the news item next month. And also, in the meantime, I look forward to chatting with you all in the premieres, which happen on Friday. As I said, this one that I'm working on currently, I'm currently in the process of editing it. We are going to be looking at the most valuable / expensive books, or texts rather, in the world today, or at least as far as we know. I'm going to have a look at that. So I hope that you can join me for that and that you will enjoy it as well. I hope that you are all going to have a wonderful rest of your Monday, however much of your Monday you have left, and certainly a wonderful rest of your week. In the UK, I believe it's half term this week, next week maybe. So if you have got kiddies off for half term, I hope you manage to do some fun things with them. There are lots of cool activities and exhibitions on at various museums. If you do find a good one, do let me know about it. Maybe I can share it. In fact, we do have some plans to take the boys for a sleepover at a historical site. And I was thinking about maybe making that into a Friday video. I probably won't, well, I certainly won't be showing my children, but I thought maybe I could show you what the experience was like if it's something that maybe you would be interested in as well. So is that the sort of thing that people would like me to do? Maybe if I go and do these experiences with my kids or by myself. Jessie, caravan, hotel room, motel, my darling. Where we're talking about, there is the option to do glamping. Absolutely not for me. There is also cabins. Not for me. We will be in a hotel. We will be in a hotel because I am soft, very soft. So I thought this might be something that would be quite fun to share. I'm looking to do more experimental things with the channel, and I have got this history-themed activity that's going to be good for small children, which I know not everybody has small children or small children in their life, but still, hopefully it will be something that might be fun for people to check out. So that is what we're doing. And what else? So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, whatever you're doing. And I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. But do take care of yourselves. And for now, it's going to be bye-bye from me.